Hey everyone, welcome to another video of DC NBA Junkie, where I'll be discussing NBA related content every single day. I'm continuing a new series called NBA Team Futures, where each day I will be deep diving into a different NBA team and talking about my stance on each team moving forward from the NBA hiatus. If that seems interesting to you, then feel free to tune in on some NBA content. For today's episode, I'll be taking a closer look with the second LA team, the Clippers. They had recently just acquired superstar Kawhi Leonard during the 2019 free agency, in addition to trading for Paul George at that same time. The Clippers are making a push for an NBA title in the next few seasons. However, that came at the expense of their nearby future. And if it sounds interesting to look into, then let's get right into it. But before I begin, make sure to leave a like on the video and comment down any suggestions for any certain video ideas, or even what NBA team I should do next. Any suggestion is greatly appreciated. But lastly, make sure to subscribe. I mean, we're all here for some nice NBA content. Now, without further ado, let's take a look into the future of the Los Angeles Clippers. To begin, I want to talk about the consistency with the Los Angeles Clippers. They had a 44-20 record throughout the season before the NBA was canceled for the rest of the season temporarily. It was very impressive, especially for a team who had many players injured during the season. And honestly, I think when we think about the Clippers and their progression and where I feel like they stand in terms of next season, I think consistency is important. They had they had 6 notable losses to teams under 500 in the league, and 3 of them notably were the Hawks, the Bulls, and the Kings, which those 3 are some 3 bottom teams in the league, and it's not very good for a team who's contending to be losing games like that to really not very good teams. And ultimately, another thing when we think about consistency is just ultimately the bench presence for this team. They have Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams coming off their bench. They also have the likes of Landry Shamet, whether or not he's starting in the game. But other than that, they don't really have much depth. They have Reggie Jackson coming off the bench. But in terms of what's going to really put them over the top, I don't see a lot of bench presence. So hopefully, for them, that their starting lineup and those few players they have, their 6th, 7th, 8th men off the bench, can provide the scoring they need and enough for them to win games. And especially, they do have the signings to Reggie Jackson and Joakim Noah that they picked up throughout the season, and they were using those players strictly to see if they can provide some assistance to their team. However, I don't know if the season returns how at least Joakim Noah would contribute. But as far as the rest of the team, I just think consistency is something you need to look forward to in terms of thinking about the future for the Clippers. Next, I'd like to look at the injuries, because one of the things that definitely derailed the Clippers' success throughout the season was their substantial amount of injuries through a widespread of players. I mean, the most obvious one would be PG. He missed 22 games out of a 64-game season. Kawhi Leonard missed 13, mainly because of load management, like back-to-back on the second game. He would miss out. Beverly missed 16 due to an injury I believe he suffered around December, January. So there were a couple other minor injuries, but because of those 3 notable injuries, it was hard for the Los Angeles Clippers to have every single player out on the court or for a good number of games this season. I think there was only like a single digit or maybe a barely double digit number of games where they've had everybody on the court at once playing with each other, but they were good when everybody was on the court. But the problem is that I also questioned PG and Kawhi's chemistry together, because Paul George did miss 22 games and Kawhi missed 13. So, there were only a few number of games where they were able to play with each other because they each missed a handful number of games. So moving forward, I don't feel like it's a big issue, but I do feel like it's something to make mention of, just how PG and Kawhi can work with each other and can keep working to solidifying their chemistry on the court and ultimately just prepping for the next season or for the remainder of this season if we do have that. Next, I would like to talk about the competing with LA. Just another quick short topic, just that, you know, they have a widespread of accusations. I think they're one of the more, I think they are the deepest team in the league in terms of depth and players on their team in comparison to any other team in the league. And I think that's very important for a team, especially if injuries, which they've had this season, and that's the reason why they've been able to have a 44-20 record, because they've had players that could come up and, you know, fulfill the role of someone who is injured, or at least do as much as they can. And so when I'm thinking about competing with LA, I'm mainly thinking towards next season and possibly this season especially, because that's really important, because LA will, the Lakers I'm talking about, they'll have to go through the Lakers most likely if they're going to go as far as they can in the playoffs. So ultimately my two questions when I think about when competing with LA is, can they stay healthy? Because I've already talked about with the injuries that they've had a handful of injuries that have kept them all playing with each other at once, and just being able to play games and just work with each other throughout an entire season in preparation for really what they're working for, and that's the playoffs. And next, kind of thinking about next season is, can they re-sign some of their players that are on expiring contracts? And that moves into my next topic, is free agency review. And they have a couple of expiring contracts. Marcus Morris, Patrick Patterson, the smaller contract at Reggie Jackson, but the most important one is Montrezl Harrell. This is his last season with $6 million, and he does not have any option for next season, so they're going to have to pay him. And due to the amount of, you know, the performance he's given to them this season, he's going to need to receive, I'd say, at least $15 million, even to, you know, as much as maybe even as least as $20 million. He's a really special player. Even though he comes off the bench, that man could be starting, and, you know, sometimes he does play in the starting lineup, but mainly he's playing there on the bench. And I think that his contribution to this team is super important. So in terms of free agency, I don't see them bringing back many players because they already have so many players winded up on contracts. I also have to mention Marcus Morris has made $15 million this season. I don't know how much he deserves next season. He wasn't performing too amazing on the Clippers. He was still putting up points, but he's not a very good on the defensive end, so you can't rely on him to provide you much there. But I think what I would focus on if I were the management is just making sure we re-sign everybody, because you're at this point working to win a title, and you have a bunch of players you have two players that you need to make sure you try and attempt to win now with Paul George and Kawhi. And they also have Beverly, Lou Will, and Ivica at least making $6 million a year, which is, you know, substantial money. So it's really not looking that like they're going to get anybody from the free agent market. So at this point, I think it's just working to resign Montrezl Harrell for sure, Marcus Morris because he's a really good offensive player, Reggie Jackson for some good bench point guard minutes, and they can get Patrick Patterson. That would obviously, you know, be the more the better. Okay, so now for the segment I'll do for every single team is the final segment. It's a hypothetical one, is if the season continues and where I feel that team stands going into, you know, the final couple of games and the playoffs. And for the Clippers, it's kind of like the Lakers situation. They are both the top teams in the West, but for the Clippers, I think they have an upper advantage because they had a couple injuries before the hiatus, and I think that being able to have this time off, allowing those players to heal, can put them in a really good position, especially since a lot of their players aren't too old. Paul George, especially, is going to benefit from this because he was, you know, having the injuries for about a third of the season. So him being able to heal up if they can continue the season, and Kawhi Leonard, you know, being ready, you know, not having to be used for load management, especially not in the playoffs. So I think in terms of their competition in the West, they'd have a big advantage with the depth they have, plus being able to heal from injuries that they've had from, I believe they had Lou Williams. I don't think it was a big, I think it was a day-to-day, and I know Beverly had one, but I'm just saying those guys who've, you know, had injuries throughout the season, being able for them to heal is really important for them. And I think when we're thinking about the season continues as well, is, like I said, being a big time threat for the title, but can they play together? That, it builds up, the injuries and the consistency problems. Will that translate? Like, can they fix it and ultimately just perform well in the playoffs? If that makes sense, because they're having some breakdowns throughout the season, and in order for them to to really utilize their assets to the best of their ability, they have to work together, and everybody needs to play their role, and that's how they're going to take the next step. And being able, if the season continues, I see them really putting a push, and I think seeing them against in the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers is very realistic. Now, who wins? I'm a Lakers fan, so I would pick them, but it's a good matchup, so I don't think I'll say anything for that, but I just say it would be a really fun matchup to see the Battle of LA. I just really hope we can at least get that. And yeah, with that being said, that will be the end of my team futures for the Los Angeles Clippers. So once again, thank you so much for watching the video. Make sure to leave a like, comment, like I said before, any suggestions for some future ideas, videos, or the next team you want me to do. I'm open for any suggestions right now, and make sure to subscribe. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, so with that being said, thank you and have a good day.